All right, so today we're gonna embark on an ignition tune-up of the LS460. This came about for a couple reasons. Basically, for one thing, this car has 100,000 miles on it, just turned 100,000, and it's never had spark plugs. The factory interval for spark plugs on this is 60,000. Some people say that's BS. I tend to believe that's BS. I mean, I was always taught platinum spark plugs should last 100,000, so it's got exactly 100,000 on it now. So it seems like a pretty good time to do the spark plugs. And the other thing that happened with this car is, so I was on kind of an extended road trip, or like a 3-hour drive a few months ago, and I got to the end of that drive, and the car was nice and warm. Car had been doing great. And I turned off like the, main road to my destination, and the parking lot where I was pulling into was up a hill. And I turned to go up the hill, and the car started to not feel right, started to feel really down on power. And it was just very unusual. That was the only time it ever did that. But the next morning, I had a check engine light, as I was kind of expecting, and it was a check engine light for a cylinder number 5 misfire. Now, this car, it's never been actively symptomatic since that time. I've never felt the misfire or the poor running ever since that one time. However, it's been several months, and if you try to reset the check engine light, it will stay off for a while. Days, maybe even a couple weeks. It'll stay off for a while, and then it'll come right back, and it will be that PO305 cylinder number 5 misfire again. So, it could be the plug, theoretically. I don't think that's real likely. But, I mean, when you got 100,000 miles on your plugs, anything can happen. That's a lot for plugs. So they're due. So we got a box full of plugs right here, and also one coil. So as long as I got everything apart, we will ohm out the number 5 coil and see if we can attempt to test that. Also just do a visual inspection on anything that can be visually inspected. First, with this car, you begin by removing the plastics. So, yeah, we'll remove the plastics and see what we're left with. The plastics are pretty easy. All right, so all the plastics are off. You can see them all arranged over there. And this is what the engine looks like without plastics. So this time I'm going to make a few notes, not entirely for the purposes of this video, but partially for myself. Number 1, I shot that first video at 9:45. Just gonna kind of keep track of how long it takes a regular guy in a garage to do a spark plug job on a LS460 like this. One thing I noticed, this electrical connector, it's kind of like a little 2-piece connector. Anyways, it's like the second piece is not, that should be clipped in. I'm going to leave it unclipped for now, but we should clip that back together. Just looking for clues that people have been in here. And I know people have been in here before because I know the valve cover gaskets were done on this car when they sold it to me. Yeah, the dealership that sold it to me did the valve cover gaskets to sell it. And the passenger side one is still leaking. So the battery, another note about this. The hold down is loose. The battery looks old. We'll check a year on it when we get to that. But it does kind of look old. Like I said, hold down's loose, and the this goes right there. That's how that goes. None of those little plastic clips were in, so I don't know. I mean, I get it. It's a little bit sloppy. I don't know if I'll ever be inspired to replace them because I would probably have to go to a dealership and get the things for it, but it'd be nice if that was not. I mean, like a lot of those plastic covers had like a dozen clips in them originally, and now they're down to like the last 2. And I'm kind of like, okay, that's about right, But 0 is kind of seems like not very many, I guess. I don't know. Does that math? Not sure. So the next step is take off all this ductwork. It's not difficult, just for the record, but we gotta do that. And then you can see the coils. This one has the number 5 etched in it. Not sure how obvious that'll be on video, but you see your number 5, your number 3, number 1 is under this, and then your number 7 is all the way back there. That's the reason why you gotta take the battery out. I suspect with the battery out, or suspect, I should say hope, pray, that with the battery out and the ductwork's off, there's your number 6, there's your 8 back there. Interesting how, 5 had a number etched in it, 6 has a number etched in it, and none of the other ones have a number etched in them, I don't think, which is interesting, I guess, question mark. Anyways, we're about to see what we can find out. So that's our stuff right there. And yeah, like I said, got our work cut out for us, all this duct work, and then that battery right there. And we should have better visual representation. This is the 1017 update. Got the battery off, got all the plastics off. None of this is difficult. A few more notes. Did find some combustible materials in the battery tray. Not sure why those were deemed necessary when somebody installed this. It is an Autocraft Platinum. It's an AGM battery. It's January of 19. That's a year before anyone had ever even heard of COVID-19. So, yeah, this battery is about to turn 6 years old. I'm tempted to replace it preemptively because I've driven the Lexus LS model, even prior to this one for a considerable term of my life. And I've learned that the only thing that breaks on them is every 5 or 6 years, this. And unfortunately, you don't get to control where you are when that happens. But back to the matter at hand. I don't think I have any more notes or discoveries from this. One thing that's nice is the antifreeze level on this one is steady. I have not added antifreeze to this in a long time. When I first bought it, it was a little bit low, and I had to top it off a couple times. And once I got it to full level, it stayed there for a while. So that's a good thing, because these cars do have the valley plate leak that will eventually happen on this car. It'll set me back a couple grand, and we'll all just live, and we'll make it past. This is the valve cover that leaks. I'm kind of sizing this guy up and thinking, do I want to fool with that myself? Or do I want to pay a shop to replace that valve cover gasket, because it will eventually need to be replaced. So again, this has a 5 etched into it, this coil right here, and then the 6 over there has a 6 etched into it. And considering the 5 is where I'm getting the code, I don't know what to make of that. Now, granted, I drove this car for probably 6, 7, 8 months before it ever popped the code. But that's just interesting. So yeah, so back to the issue at hand. So I think first we're gonna, I don't know. I don't know. Confidence booster. We'll do number 1 first and 3, and we'll see where that gets us. And then we'll break out the old ohm meter and start poking things with that. So it is with a tremendous amount of pride that I can tell you I have removed the number 1 cylinder spark plug. This is going to be a bit of a struggle. This is kind of a surgical operation. I can tell that the frontmost 2 cylinders on each bank spark plugs are going to be the difficult ones. These ones ought to be easy. The front 2 are difficult because of the clearance with this right here. So not only can you not get the coil out, you cannot get a spark plug socket and extension in easily. So it's all very surgical. This is the coil. It came out, obviously, of that hole. It did not want to come out, and I'm not really sure how I did get it out. They say on the internet to use a crowbar like this to pry between the engine and the strut tower, or yeah, whatever you want to call that. And that's not, number 1, no. Number 1, you don't get anything out of that. Like, you can barely get this engine to budge. Number 2, I don't know if I'm prying on the right thing. Like, am I on a heat shield? Am I on a cylinder head? Am I on a valve cover that I don't want to be? I mean, that's not satisfactory. I don't like that. But I did it because I had to. And it's like, you don't get any movement out of it. It doesn't do anything hardly. It gets like maybe a millimeter, and then you're just supposed to like just force this thing. It doesn't feel good. I'm surprised this thing didn't break. I really am. And I don't know. And that's 1 out of 4. So I'm not thrilled that I have to do that 4 times. I think that should be better designed, to be frank. And yeah, this is kind of a surgical process. So yeah, to get the spark plug out, I mean, you can't just go in there whole hog with your extension and your spark plug socket and your wrench. You have to build it up each time. So you have to drop the spark plug socket down in there, and then you have to drop in a long extension after that. Short won't work. Gotta do a long extension, you gotta drop that in after that, and then you can just barely get the wrench on the extension. And even then, you can only really use the wrench to break the thing loose, because once it gets a couple turns out, now you no longer have the clearance to disassemble this whole thing that you've built. So you can only use that whole assembly for breaking it loose, and then the remaining turns, you better hope it's loose enough to just do by hand with the extension, because that's all you're gonna have the clearance for. Yeah, the clearance is not great here, and it's kind of like, yeah, I do kind of feel like this is not the best design by Toyota. I know, like, yeah, you know, as a mechanic, you got to complain when it's not easy for you. It's like, yeah, the old LS400, you know, that was a complicated car. There were some difficult things on that, but there was never anything that was like, okay, this was straight up not built with any thought. And yeah, that's how I kind of feel about this. But saltiness aside, so that's 1 out of 4. Oh, and we got to look at this. So this is a 100,000 mile spark plug. This will now sit in my basement for several years. I actually just this weekend threw out the 100,000 mile spark plugs from when I last changed them, from when I drove a LS400 before I had this. And so there it is. I guess that's fine. And then this is the new one. They are the exact same model. I own so many spark plug gap tools. I can find 0 of them. So we're gonna call that gapped. And they are the exact same model. It is a FK20 HBR, HB Robinson, Unit 11. It's the future. FK20 HBR 11. So yeah, so these are our things. I'm gonna put some stuff on it. Yeah, because we like things and stuff. Yeah, nobody put any anti-seize on this. I mean, I guess that's factory? I don't know. I assume that's a factory plug. Be nice if I had a date or something on it, but I don't think that spark plugs ever come with that. So they are the same model though. So yeah, I'm gonna start putting that back together. I guess as long as I got this thing out, I'm just gonna take ohm readings on all of them. I have no idea how to ohm these out, so I'm just gonna do all of it, but I'm just gonna like probe. There's 4 things here, and then there's obviously this. So like, I'm just gonna touch things with the probe and see if anything makes sense in my life. All right, cylinder number 1 update time. You know, it's a good YouTube channel when it's just a spark plug job and you get updates by cylinder. So yeah, so spark plug number 1 is in. It did take me several moments. So I will tell you, just as I told you, it was very surgical coming out. And it's also very surgical coming in, because basically, like I said, you have to build up your apparatus, which consists of, first you stick the spark plug socket into the hole, then you can stick the extension into the hole, then you can get it hand tight, and then you can do the last 2 turns with this. Now, you will barely get the wrench on, at least this wrench, and I mean, the way I have it, it's up against this strut tower wall. So it's cocked diagonally, so I don't feel happy about, I can't get a good read on what kind of torque I'm getting on it. I don't like the fact that the wrench in the extension is off axis as I tighten it, but I don't see any other way without like doing some kind of, going to a drive shafts shop and having them customize this down to the millimeter for this job. I don't see how you're supposed to do this in a fashion that is satisfactory. But hey, we got the plug in there. Now that's not the hard part. Actually, the hard part is when you go to disassemble and remove the apparatus, because you can get the head of the wrench off barely, but you can. What you can't do easily is you cannot remove the extension and spark plug socket assembly while clearing the strut tower. So now if this gets stuck to the spark plug, you're effed, right? Because the magnet is not strong enough to remove this when it's stuck to the spark plug. So you have to, using this all together, you have to make sure that this all comes off as an assembly from the spark plug. Then, once that comes off as an assembly from the spark plug, you will not be able to remove it because it is too long and you don't have the clearance. So what you have to do then is, with this all in the hole, you have to be able to separate, with this all in the hole and detached from the spark plug, you have to separate this and this so that ultimately you can remove this on its own and then fish this out from the hole using the magnet. Now, that is the hard part, is separating these two. Of all of this, that is the most difficult part. I had to try numerous tools, and I ultimately found that only this would work. This is a broken dental tool from CVS Pharmacies from when I was in college 10 or 15 years ago that is broken in just the right way that it works for this particular application and nothing else does. So unless you have that, I would not recommend attempting this job on your own. But with all that being said, we're fine, I think. We got a spark plug. And that's how many complaints I had to lodge to get that. So yeah, not a 350 we're working with here, folks. It's not a Ford 305 or anything like that. Ford 305, what am I talking about? You know what, I like the way that sounds. I'm gonna bore mine out a little bit. Anyways, so with the number one coil out and the new coil off the shelf here, Tenso, look at that, made in Japan. We've got these and we compared them with the ohm meter. I will set that to off now because I'm a conscientious thing owner. And so I ohmed each of these against each other in all combinations, and they are completely identical, which is fabulous. And I also ohmed this thing right here against all four of these in all four combinations. And again, they are identical. So at least from an ohm standpoint, these two, which I expected the number one to be good, I have no reason to suspect that. These two seem satisfactory, and we will begin the reassembly process. All right, so this is the moment of truth. As you can see, we have an empty hole on the number 5 cylinder, which is where we were having our misfire code. So let's turn our attention to the components that we removed. We have our coil, and ohmed out versus our new coil. What we find is all of the readings are identical between the number 5 coil and the new coil. Would have been real nice to find a smoking gun there, because coil was hopefully one of the more likely culprits. But I will say that all hope is not lost, because these things heat up, and sometimes with electrical components, ignition components like this, as they heat up, the resistance changes. So, this is stone cold. Like I said, the first time that this issue ever reared its head, the car was nice and warm. Like I said, I think it was August or September or something. I was at the tail end of a 3-hour drive. And so it's a possibility that this thing is, when it heats up, it's got a bad resistance somewhere in it, versus what you'd expect it to be. Well, with all that being said, we're going to direct our attention away from the coils at this particular moment in time, because that was 1 out of 2 components that we removed from the number 5 cylinder. Number 2 out of 2 would be this spark plug. And the very first thing that I noticed about this spark plug is that it was hand tight. So that's interesting. As you can see, you've got our threads, number 1, number 3, and number 5. Number 1 and 3 threads are clean. Number 3 or 5 threads are fouled up, as obviously the result of combustion making its way past them, insofar as they were ready and able to be made past, if that makes any sense. And then if you further direct your attention, you can see the tips of these spark plugs are, well used, but they kind of look okay. But this one, the tip of this one, see if I can get that, it's full of these crusties. What am I to make of that? So we've got some crusties, and we've got some obvious, it was a loose spark plug. Now, what I'm hoping is that these crusties are just from the oddities of combustion that resulted in the spark plug being loose, and that is not some kind of a sign or indication of some kind of other negative thing mechanically happening inside the cylinder, that could have perhaps in past times warranted the removal of this for troubleshooting, resulting in the loose spark plug, and additionally resulting in the fact that the number 5 coil happens to be labeled number 5 while the rest of them are not. That highly interests me. But we're going to suspend all of our both belief and a disbelief for the time being. We're going to proceed as planned. And I suspect probably The optimist in me, which is, it's in there, I promise. The optimist in me wants to believe that this was just for some reason loose, perhaps from the factory. You know, maybe Japan went downhill. I don't know. I mean, it was Fukushima. This car was built like right after Fukushima. So, I don't know. Maybe they inhaled a few too many alpha particles. Happens to the best of us. So, anyways, we're going to proceed as planned. I will say this. We are in easy mode now on the back stretch of the passenger side cylinder bank. Yeah, this is a walk in the cake park, so to speak, compared to these two front ones. And honestly, even the number 3 was easier than the number 1. The number 3, I don't know how, but it has somehow more clearance than the number 1. The number 3, most importantly, has enough clearance so that when you get the wrench on your apparatus, the wrench has clearance with the isn't up against the strut tower, so you can actually get a good crank on it. You can get a good torque feel. You can get, it's not your everything is aligned. You're not cocked diagonally. This number 1, I may revisit that because I'm not satisfied with how that turned out. Like I said, when I was tightening the spark plug in there, this wrench was up against this strut tower. It was cocked diagonally. I couldn't feel where we were at torque wise. This one felt fine. I kind of felt like, okay, yeah, there's tightening, tight, you know, and it was, and like I said, I didn't have clearance issues. So yeah, I'm not satisfied with what happened there with the number 1, but yeah, suffice it to say the number 5 and 7 are easy street in comparison. And yeah, we just got to slap that guy back in. I mean, I hope that was our issue, and hopefully this thing runs a little bit better now. I mean, I did always feel like it kind of had a little bit of a miss under load. And yeah, I'm very curious to see where it winds up. All right, so it is now, I think, 12:27, so I'm gonna break for lunch, but we are officially 50% of the way through. Hopefully in terms of time, we are more than 50% of the way through. But yeah, we are officially heading down the back 9 stretch, or whatever that expression is. So all 4 of our spark plugs and coils are back in here. A couple notes that I do want to make. I mentioned earlier that this car has always had from this side valve cover gasket a slight weep. It's kind of borderline what you would want to do something about or not. But as long as I was in here, I thought, well, you know, I don't think that I'm down for a whole valve cover replacement job, especially because you got to fool with this high pressure oil pump and all that. But I did go ahead and snug up all of the bolts that hold in the valve cover gasket, or the valve cover, and you know, since this was done at a shop not that long ago, I just think that they probably didn't snug down all the bolts good enough when they did it, and that's really all that's happening here. So I just went through, snugged them down. Several of them were loose, especially like along the lower part, especially the ones that are harder to get to. You can see them down there. You kind of got to take the coils out to get to them. So I diligently went through and did all those. Like that one at the back, it's got the star key head, or whatever you want to call it, star head. That one was loose. Several of them were loose. I suspect they probably forgot to do that one. And yeah, so hopefully that fixes, or at least slows the oil weeping from this valve cover. It's not a huge concern to me. It's very, very slow. It's the kind of thing that like maybe I'll have done someday if it keeps doing it and it gets worse, but not a massive concern. Like I said again, our coolant has been staying steady for a long time, so I don't think this has any coolant leaks. These cars are prone to a couple of coolant leaks. You just got to be diligent about them. And I don't know what. Oh yeah, the other note that I wanted to make was I said earlier that I was not satisfied with how things turned out with the number 1 cylinder spark plug, because I was not satisfied that I could really get a good sense of what kind of torque I was putting on it, because the wrench was all cocked to the side, and it was like I said, the clearance, I didn't have enough clearance such that the head of the wrench was up against here, and it was not really groovy. So what I did was I took out of this spark plug socket, I took the little rubber bushing out, and that was able to give me just enough more clearance with the wrench there that I was able to get the wrench on there and have enough clearance to kind of feel what kind of torque I was dealing with. And man, I'm glad I did that, because I did not have that spark plug in there tight enough. At my initial cut at it, like I said, everything was bent and under pressure. And I was like, as soon as I felt it tightening up, I was like, oh, I don't want to go too far. I don't want to, break a $9,000 cylinder head. And so I did not have it tightened down enough. Once I got it in there with the appropriate clearance, with this bushing removed, that was enough for me to get a good torque on it. And so now I'm satisfied with that, but I'm glad I circled back around to it. So yeah, all our coils are in, all our spark plugs are in. Heading down the back stretch with these guys. All right, so it is now I think it's 1:27. I'm back from lunch, and we're working our way down the driver's side here. I got number, what is that, 2 and 4, all done and snugged up and complete. They actually were not as bad as I was thinking. You have like a tiny bit more clearance on this side. This was the hardest of all of them. But as you're taking those coils out, just a little pry with the sledge, what is that called? Crowbar, just a little pry with a crowbar, and they do slide right out. Those two over there, the what were they, 1 and 3? Those were tougher. You do still have to do the crazy thing where you kind of double clutch this whole thing with this. I really don't know how they designed this to all go together, but I've at least got this thing that kind of works. I've got the muscle memory at this point to where I can assemble and disassemble the apparatus in pretty quick time. So with all that out of the way, I do have some updates, and they are relating to the number 6 right there. Now the new number 6 spark plug is in, but you will recall from earlier that of all 8 coils on this car, only the number 6 and the number 5, somebody had gone through and etched labels on these coil numbers. So I thought that was interesting, and so I popped this number 6 coil out, and I noticed visually it looks different, right? So you see this kind of reptilian scale on the outside, and I was like, okay, I think I've seen this story before. I took a sniff of it, and it smelled like combustion. And I was like, I do think I've seen this story before, and I do think I know where it ends. And so I put a wrench on that spark plug, and to no one's surprise, it was like the number 5, it was hand tight. So if we come back here and take a quick gander, what we've got for plugs. So number 2, number 4, nice and clean, threads are clean, and number 3 was loose, and it had been for, some time. And so like number 5, there was, combustion gases leaking past it. So yeah, I don't know what to make of that. So we had 2 that were hand tight, and the 2 that were hand tight had cylinder number labels on the coils. Yeah, so that's interesting. That's very, very interesting. I do not have a concrete theory at this time as to what activity took place that led to this, other than there was some kind of ignition troubleshooting that took place in the past. Yeah, I'm genuinely confused by this one. So anyways, we're gonna go ahead and hop over to the number 8, and hopefully that is pretty easy, and get that in, and then we will be on the way back out of this job. All right, it is now 2:27 in the afternoon. All the actual ignition work is complete. Got all our plugs in, got all our coils in, and I just got back from AutoZone with a new battery, only a new battery. They only had one of these air filters on the shelf. I need 2 of them, and I thought that was the perfect excuse to just not change them because they're honestly not due for it. Anyways, so one thing that's interesting, and I noted earlier that the previous battery was on the on these planks, in the tray. So that was a size 34 battery, which is not the correct size for this car. The correct size for this car is either a 27 or a 24. The 27 is a little bit bigger, and from what I understand, these cars shipped with the 27 if they came with the cold weather package, which mine does have. Even if yours didn't ship with a 27, it's still an upgrade over the 24, so why not? A couple extra bucks, and it's a bigger battery, theoretically should last longer. I have test fitted in the tray. It does fit fine in the tray, and hopefully that will mean we can not have those planks in there, because I don't know, it'd be nice to just have a larger battery that's the correct size, not have planks. So installation is the reverse of the removal. I think it starts with battery first, and we have an opportunity to actually get that hold down bolted in place, which it was not previously. But yeah, battery in first, and then we have our ductwork goes over top of that, and then finally our plastic engine covers over the top of that. Should not take very long at all. And we can take this thing for a cruise down the road, see if it feels any better. I think the check engine light should be reset because the battery was out. So we'll see if we don't immediately have any codes. But like I said, even when this thing had the codes before, you would clear the codes and they would stay clear for some time. I think in some cases, a couple of weeks. And so it's not going to be an immediate tell. Now, I'm partially doing all this because I have several long extended road trips coming up. And so hopefully if I can complete those without that same P0305 check engine light, hopefully that's a pretty good indicator that we are in the clear. But yeah, I think I'm going to get this thing all put back together, crank it up, see if it, see if I didn't ruin it. And yeah, maybe run a couple errands. We should still have some time before close of business. It is a Monday. I kind of had some crap I was going to hawk to the pawn shop. So we'll see if we can load the trunk up and hit Candler Road, hit the strip, see who will give us a few bucks for some old stereo equipment we're not using. And that's what I like to do. I like to put money in my pocket. Not real wild about taking it out of my pocket, but I like putting it in. All right, so it's now 3:14 in the afternoon. As you can see, everything is buttoned back up. A couple more things that I want to mention that I forgot to mention earlier. The old battery that we took out of here, I did have AutoZone test it on the bench. They said it was bad, didn't have enough cranking amps. You know, granted, their machine is tuned to tell you need a new battery. But yeah, I just thought that was interesting. That thing was 6 years old, coming up on 6 years old. I'm like, look, I've had them fail at the motel in Dothan, Alabama. I've had them fail when my sister was borrowing the car. Like, you know what? I can have it fail right here. So that's what I did, new battery. The other thing that I kind of glossed over earlier there, forgot to mention earlier, is once we got the 8th spark plug out, I kind of felt like, now that thing was kind of buried, so it was kind of hard to get much of a feel on it at all, but I kind of felt like that particular spark plug was, and I don't know if that's too much light or not enough. I think it's probably better without it. But I kind of felt like number 8, which is this guy right here, this is the last one we pulled out, I kind of felt like it was just a little bit on the loose side when I took it out. It's kind of hard to tell. But then if you look at the threads there, like you get these nice super clean threads from, what is that, 2 and 4. And then these are not as bad as 5 and 6. But even these are like at the ends of them, and they're almost wet, you know? So it looks like there was some oil intrusion there. I will say, I don't think there's any love lost with these spark plugs. I do think that they're probably original with 100,000 on them. They look okay, but they don't look, you know, spectacular. But there is our set. This was, like I said, the last one I pulled out. And I didn't mention earlier that it was a little bit loose, and it does seem like there's a little bit of signs of combustion gases escaping. These front 4, I don't see any of that, and maybe a little bit on number 7, but definitely 5 and 6. Like I said, they were in there hand tight, and that's all a mystery. So, first moment of truth. Does it do anything? Because we had the battery out. So, and this is all taken apart because I'm doing a cabin air filter. Read 'em and weep. Oh, it's got a light on the start button. Sounds like a car. Uh-oh, no. It immediately stopped. Why did you do that? Please. System loading those. Oh, it's just being weird because I because I had the battery out, I'm sure. So yeah, wow, no check engine light yet. It does seem smoother, and it definitely cranked easier. That new battery was definitely a smart idea. I swear it never was this good. You know, I love it when you do that, when you put new spark plugs in, you're like, oh my God! But I really do believe, I do believe in life after love. And then we also got to do that, don't we? Yeah, and the door opens, so now we can change our little cabin air filter. Everything is going great here. We still have no check engine light. Man. Yeah. All right, yeah, so I'm gonna let that run for just a sec. Well, maybe I'll I don't know, maybe I'll change the cabin air filter, and then, like I said, I think I'm gonna hit the pawn shops today. And I think that's satisfactory. I think that's very satisfactory. I do think it's running better. Oh, another thing that I wanted to point out, I'm not satisfied with this. All these clips were missing when I took this apart. All of these clips were missing. In fact, I put that one in because I found it in an airbox or something. But yeah, I'm not happy with the way this is just kind of swinging in the wind. So that's definitely an action item for me, as I got to go get new clips from the Toyota dealership and fix that up, because I'm not thrilled about that. I'm going to close the hood on this thing. You know, I was feeling confident because I put all my tools back in the box before I even crunked this thing. Yeah, we learned so much today. Yeah, and we're going to change a cabin air filter. Yeah. I'm curious to get this guy back out on the road. Yeah, let's do this. All right, as promised, trunk is packed, and I go to Candler Road. It definitely starts better. It starts so much better. It sounds better, feels better. When you first crank it, I mean, that could just be the battery, for all I know. Oh, yeah. This does feel better. Yeah. I absolutely, I mean, maybe I'm just like placebo affecting my way into being convinced. But I do think this is better. It's more responsive. Yeah. Yeah, I think that those two cylinders were not quite right for as long as I've owned it, which is 10,000 miles now. Little under a year. I think I bought this in January or February. It's now November. But yeah, I'm really happy. Yeah, it does seem more responsive. Yeah, and I did always feel like in this car, when I would hit an uphill, under load, like uphill high gear, I did always feel like there was a miss, and that was one of the reasons why I wanted to go ahead and do the plugs. But yeah, I think that I was never really, here we go. Oh man, that is a beefy engine right there. Yeah, it was never that responsive. It just never was that responsive. It always just felt like it kind of was down on something. In hindsight, I can tell that at least. But yeah, that's pretty awesome. All right, I'm breaking my normally strict rule about not working on a car after dinner to bring you this update. So I was sitting on my couch relaxing when I realized something is rotten in the state of Denmark. These cylinder numbers that I've been spouting all day have been totally wrong. And I thought about it as soon as I sat down on the couch, and not earlier when I was in the garage. But I was like, hey, wasn't the driver's side cylinder bank further forward on the car? And wouldn't that mean that that would be the odd cylinder bank and the passenger side would be even? All day I've been going off of, this was the supposed 6. This was on the number 5 cylinder. This was the supposed 5. That was on the number 6 cylinder, actually. So when I ohmed all these out in the garage and I said, oh, the coil on number 5 cylinder is fine, so it's not the coil, because again, the code was number 5. I was right and wrong. It did ohm out fine, but that was number 6, not really our concern. This was the coil installed on the number 5 cylinder, which, by the way, had the most of the blow-by from the loose, what was I saying? Loose spark plug. So anyways, still no smoking gun. So I ripped this off real quick because it was one of the easier ones to get to, brought it in here, and I ohmed these out in comparison with each other. They're fine, and this one was fine in comparison with the new one. Either way, since this is the one on the cylinder that was giving me the code, I want that out of the car. This one, which I kept in the box, this one I am going to put back in the car tonight. So yeah, again, so no smoking gun. And with heat cycles, sometimes resistances on these can change. Just because it's ohmed out fine here in the kitchen does not mean that it's necessarily good. It's still to our best interest to have this one out and this one in, so that's exactly what we're going to do. I'm going to go button that back up. But yeah, so no smoking gun on the coils, but this is an important note that I had my cylinder numbers wrong all day, and also that that this should be the coil that we should be keeping in the car. That is the one that we should keep out. So, all right, so it's now several days later. Car's doing great, running great, no check engine light. This is kind of a logic problem, and I don't have an answer to it. Why were the 5 and 6 coils labeled? Why were they swapped? And why were the 5 and 6 spark plugs loose, or at least not fully tight? Somebody was in there doing something, and my best guess is that they previously had a misfire code on either the 5 or 6 cylinder, and their attempt at troubleshooting was to swap the coils and the plugs on those cylinders, and that's about as far as they got. That's the thing, is I don't know if the misfire code that I got was that because the spark plug was loose. That would seem to stand to reason. Or was the spark plug loose because somebody previously was getting this same code, possibly for the coil or spark plug, and then the spark plug being loose is just a symptom of that. So anyways, I'm still left with a few questions. I have some half answers, but nothing really concrete. Like I said, car's doing great so far. Hopefully it continues to. I got several road trips in the near future, so I'm sure if that check engine light stays on for the next few months, something tells me we probably fixed it. It is running a little bit better than it ever did. So anyways, if anybody's got any theories as to what happened, you're welcome to let me know. Otherwise, yeah, we're going to say that was good. We fixed some stuff. We learned some stuff. And yeah, that's really it.